Exercise 1 in solid modeling using Creo. So by now hopefully you have Creo launched and you have your exercise 1 PDF file which tells you what to do. In this first introductory file you basically have how to set up everything you're going to need in order to move forward. So the first thing that they ask you to do is basically set a working directory. So the working directory is pretty important, considering every single time that you open or save a file, it will go to that default directory. However, it is not exactly critical. So if you cannot get it to work, whatever, you'll be able to go through the file menus and get to where you actually need to be. But we'll start here. So I've already selected my working directory to be how to model anything, and essentially I have everything I need in here. So the first thing I need to do is open Deep Sea Sub. So you have these files, you have part files, and you have assemblies. So we're going to do the Deep Sea Sub assembly, which should have essentially all of the stuff in there. Click open and move forward. So basically this program runs a bunch of files and commands, which essentially they call parts and assemblies, and you run these things and you combine them and you get a full three-dimensional image of what you're trying to model. So this goes to explain that essentially. I would highly recommend reading it, that way you have a general understanding of how this all works. So you have your procedural representation, which is, how the program works, and then you have your graphical representation, which is how we see the world. So in order to manipulate how we see things, you need to understand that basic model tree and the language behind it. You have datums, however you want to pronounce it, which is basically your planes. And so it explains kind of like your viewing, and then you have your individual parts, and you kind of have how to insert something new. Understand your coordinate systems, X, Y, Z, plane, and you have a rotation center which has these lovely colors on them, green, blue, and red. So whenever you spin something, it'll be there. This information, these steps go forward and ask you to change your filters. So let's say you don't want them on, you can change essentially what to display, select them all. Basically walking through what all these buttons do. And you should be familiar with that, that way you know what is available. Zooming and kind of refitting and whatever you need to be able to do, because it's actually fairly easy in this program to lose what you're studying or what you're looking at. All of a sudden it's just gone. So it's important to know how to use it, and it's a little awkward because your zooming works on where your mouse is. So if I zoom in and out, I can all of a sudden lose my piece. So it's important to understand that and actually have a decent mouse. So if you move through, it talks about how these models are made. You have all essentially your language here, your model tree, your graphics toolbar, and your graphics area. And then goes through all your buttons. Pretty straightforward, you can see those. Now, the first set of commands that it goes through is how basically to move the model around. This whole feature uses the mouse 3 button, which is your mouse wheel. So if we want to rotate, zoom in, zoom out, or pan, we have a combination of buttons there. So I can hold down the mouse wheel and I can spin and rotate, and you'll notice that my my mouse changes to a different image. So I can see that it's a rotation image as soon as that happens. Now I can change that by holding shift, and I can actually what they call pan. So if I hold shift and use the mouse 3 button, I can move the object around. So I can pan and move up and down and kind of get a good look at my model. And you notice that even by doing this, I get a little funny rotation, so it can be really kind of frustrating to work with if you're not used to it. And then also your zoom, your mouse wheel zoom, which we've already done. So you move down here, sometimes it can get lost. You can use your refit button, which I pointed out earlier, which is nice to know. And then you can actually change the name views of things. I don't think we'll really get into that, but it talks about your datums, talks about your areas, and it also talks about different types of model displays, which is actually pretty important to how you want things to look. So you can take away different shadings, you can hide a bunch of features if you just want to look at the basic lines. Pretty straightforward, just kind of going through all the buttons that you have. Keeps going, tells you to pan, tells you to zoom. Now, one of the more important things is these models are interactive. So if you hold Control and Alt together with your mouse, you can actually typically interact with these pieces. So you can move them around. I'm holding Control Alt and the left click button on my mouse, and I can interact with these. And we will do this, but basically the way this works is when you join these parts together, you establish a set of rules. How this object can move, what angle can it move at, what plane does it move in, and so on. So the instructions kind of go through that and talk about all the different pieces and how your model tree works, where I can just look at basically my arms, and that's my arms highlighted there. I can look through the engines, I can look through the body, and you can see how this assembly is made. And it talks about just going through different things and how you can take your model tree and then essentially open different parts of only that. So like, let's say if we want to look at only the body, we can do that. That is something we have the power to do. That way, you don't want to work on the whole model, you can only work on this. It's not very difficult. So Control Alt opens things, and mouse 3 basically moves things around. You can use Shift and mouse 3 to pan. Important things you should remember. So it goes through a bunch of different things, a bunch of different interactions that you can have, and I think it's important to go through all of these. Appearance is not the biggest deal, but if you do want to color things, you can. And it kind of goes through here. And I would just go through all of these, and in the review here it talks about what it mentioned. Now what I want from you is I want your final assessment. So I want you to go through these questions, and I want you to answer them. This is the way that I'm making sure that you've gone through everything. And then what I'm looking for is screenshots. So I'm looking for you to open this file, which is the glider assembly, and I want you to go through manipulating, rotating, changing colors, changing appearance, going through only the landing gear, and kind of go through here. So you should produce 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 unique screenshots and submit those to Google Classroom. That way I know that you've done it. That way I know that you've gone through the first exercise. And essentially that's it. One of the main things actually that you should know about is this, which I believe is actually one of your assessment questions. It is closing a model. You need to erase it from the memory in the program, and once you read through to figure out why, but it is important. So do look into that and do pay attention to that.